Let's go over the materials. First of all, I have a very fancy cardboard box. This is good for dyeing because basically you can throw it away at the end of your process. Next, you will need Jacquard Procion Mx Dye in chocolate brown, bronze, and ecru. You will need a misting spray bottle, and you can find these in any of your generic craft stores. You can find them at beauty supply stores as well. They don't last forever, but they are reusable for a few times. What tends to break is the squeezing mechanism in the spray bottle. You also will need mini measuring spoons. So this particular set starts at a 1/4 teaspoon and goes all the way down to a 1/64 of a teaspoon. And that's pretty much the main materials. We'll talk at the end about a few other things that I like to do just to make sure that we have all of the pieces together. I like to use craft paper. This is just generic brown craft paper to stuff the shoe so that it looks like this. So to do that, I start by taking some craft paper, wadding it up, and I stuff it inside the box of the pointe shoe and then inside the rest of the body of the shoe, just to stretch out the sides so you get a very even spray all over the shoe. So when you're done, it looks like this. Now, I also want to note that it works best if you can dye the shoes when they are brand new. Many dancers I know like to wear their shoes in a lot. They may like to customize them. The problem is if you jet glue these shoes and any of the glue gets on the satin, the dye won't take to that satin. So it's a lot easier if you go ahead and dye them first and then sew your ribbons and elastic on and do any customization to the pointe shoe that your dancer wants to do. All right, next, mixing our mix. So today I'm gonna do a number 5 shoe. So you can see here, I have a scale 1 to 6 with the colors that I've worked up recipes for. My hope is that as a community, we will all work together to build more recipes to match different colors of tights because the tights and the shoes should match. So if we're doing a number 5, that means I need a 1/4 teaspoon of ecru. And the great thing about this is if you can measure for a cake, you can measure this dye. Now I am at the end of my bottle here, so I have just enough to get the right amount in for this color. And then I need 1/4 teaspoon chocolate brown. And 1/4 teaspoon of the bronze. Then you fill your spray bottle with water, but not all the way up. I like to say about 2/3 of the way up in this particular spray bottle, or about a cup. And this is distilled water, but it does not have to be. It can be just regular tap water. And room temperature is fine, cold is fine. You don't need to heat up the water at all because this is a cold process dye. Then, make sure to give the bottle a little shake. Got to mix it up. Make sure all the dye is mixed in, and I can still see some at the bottom. So, keep working for a bit till that starts to come through. Still mixing. All right. Now, I like to give the bottle a couple of pumps to start getting the spray to come through evenly. And when it's starting to spray evenly, then you can pick up your shoe and start dyeing it. Now, as a little warning, I don't like to wear gloves, but I do recommend you wear vinyl gloves or thin gloves just to protect your hands when you do this. I really should be wearing them, but I, for some reason, never have them on hand when I'm doing this. So just like you would if you were airbrushing or spray painting, you want to keep the bottle moving fairly quickly. And you want to spray lightly over the whole shoe. The color will look darker at the beginning and it will lighten as it dries. So do keep that in mind. I like to do 3 coats on each shoe with some drying time in between, because I feel like that gives a nice rich color to the satin rather than it just being kind of light. But as you can see from the pictures, it does keep the nice shininess of the satin going. Make sure that you get all the corners, make sure that you get under the platform. But the best part about this is that it does a very light amount of water on the outside of the shoe, and it does not penetrate inside the shoe to really soften the box prematurely. So as you can see, that's 1 coat. That's all the time that it took. So now I'm going to set this in the box and let it dry for a while until I decide if I need to do a second coat. And that's an if. Now, one thing I want to talk about really briefly is all point shoes are different. Different brands dye in different ways. The main issue is often the casing here at the top, because if this is synthetic materials, it will probably not dye as well. If it's natural materials, it dyes just fine with this process. If the casing does not dye well, a couple of options that I've used are fabric paint to dye or to match the casings. But one of the most effective things I've found is Skin Color Sharpie. This works really well for covering casings that don't dye. There's a few different skin colors available, and these are also available in your regular craft store. The same thing is true regarding ribbons and elastic. So my personal preference is a few companies make skin color ribbon and skin color elastic. One thing that drove me to do this is that many of the point shoe companies introduced skin colored point shoes during 2020, but then have recently discontinued many of them or made them custom order only. And so many of them have skin color elastics and ribbons in their inventory, and they're often on clearance or discontinued pricing right now. So if you want to go ahead and purchase ribbons and elastic, I do recommend that. If the ribbons are the regular standard satin, they will dye with this formulation. So you can go ahead and use this to dye your ribbons as well. I just feel it dyes better not attached to the shoe than attached to the shoe. It makes it a little bit more complicated to get a nice even spray on the shoe when the ribbons and elastics are sewn on. Secondly, elastic is a synthetic material. So I'm gonna do some experimenting, and I encourage you to also. Does this process work well on elastics? If we have them taken off and we heat up the dye, does that work instead? So there's a lot of continued exploration that I have to do with this process, but I'm excited to have you all join me as we figure out how to do this in the best and most efficient way possible. I hope we can grow this community to help support our dancers of color. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me at our new Gmail address, ourpoint@gmail.com, and hopefully we can crowdsource some solutions together. Thanks.